to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah. God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's more to you than you think.
Akshay, welcome, my man.
Thanks so much for having me, brother. Pleasure to be here.
Good to have you out here. So before we talk about this term you coined and this book that you named after this term that you coined called Fearvana, I want you to take people to where you take people at the start, at the intro of this book, which is a pretty dark place where you're looking down at a empty liter of vodka.
Yeah.
That's a questionable choice, my friend.
Right.
That's how you should know right there, actually. That you
And
make.
it's-
I mean, if it was like a nice bottle of scotch, you could be like, eh.
It's
or like
Taka
a,
vodka. It's the cheapest
like
you
a
could find.
good bottle of mezcal. You'd be like, yeah, it was a good night, you know. But an empty liter of vodka.
It was a dark space, man. It was a dark space. I had been, after coming back from the war, I did 6 years in the Marines, one tour in Iraq. I had been struggling since coming back home. I've lost a friend in the war, lost a couple of junior Marines to suicide, and I've always felt guilty about my presence in life. Like, why did I come back home? I didn't get shot. I haven't lost any limbs. I didn't die out there. What right did I have to be here, to be happy?
They call that survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt, yeah.
Right. So you had a pretty strong case of that.
Big time, yeah. And just, that what my worth in this life, why was I here? I mean, when I came back from Iraq, I was volunteering to go back to Iraq and Afghanistan every chance I could get. I wanted to go back to war. And even when I went to Iraq, I went there with the mentality that I'm not going to come back. And admittedly naive, admittedly stupid also, in the sense that naive, you can't control the nature of war, right? Like bullets fly where they fly. But so when I did come back, I was lost in many ways. And at that moment, it was years after the war. I had, got out of the Marines at this point. I had a corporate job for a year and a half. I quit that. So now with no external structures to guide me, I was forced to face my own consciousness, to face my demons.
I think I want you to continue this story, but just before I forget, one of the principles that probably you talk about this in the book, like the fact that you went to war not really caring if you came back and expecting kind of not to, that was an orientation to fear that was different than most, that probably actually helped you succeed in coming back alive to a certain degree in like a weird way. Like, I mean, the samurai, like the first line of the code of the samurai is like, the samurai before everything else must know the fact that he has to die.
He will die. Yeah.
Yeah, that he will die.
Yeah,
that's like written deep in the warrior code, right?
They used to commit seppuku, right? I still have a tattoo of a
Yeah,
samurai
yeah.
committing seppuku. Yeah.
Right. Like this is the idea, like accept your death. And that's where the book actually starts with acceptance too.
Yeah.
But like in a weird way, you were doing it for totally the wrong reasons, because there's probably a disrespect and disregard for how magical and beautiful life actually is.
Very much so.
But nonetheless, it's still kind of it adhered to some ancient warrior principles that probably helped you actually succeed in that environment.
Yeah, it did, and I didn't have the level of consciousness and awareness I do now by any stretch of the imagination. So admittedly, it was naive. I mean, the reason I sort of went out there with that perspective too was because before I went, like when I first joined my unit right here in Austin, actually, Weapons Company 123 here in Austin, when I first came out of boot camp and joined my unit, there was a buddy of mine that I met, Jacob Neal, and we got very close. Like we used to do everything together, train together. We volunteered to go to war every chance we could get together. And twice the Marines told us we would go, and then last minute they canceled it. And whenever we would train, that I would like beat him by a few seconds on a run, beat him by a few points on the rifle range, but I'd beat him by these seconds, just in a small bit. And one summer, while I was out vacationing in India, he finally ended up finding a unit to volunteer with, and I didn't go with him. And as a result, when he did go to Iraq, he was promoted to corporal. And because of that, he was in a seat that was hit with an IED, a bomb, and he was killed. Mm. And so I always felt like I had no right off being vacationing in India, and I should have gone with him. And I should have gotten that promotion instead of him. And it should have been me that got hit instead of him. Now, again, rationally, I get that's naive. Rationally, I get that we could go out to war together and he could still have died and I could still come back. But emotionally, it did not change the fact that I should not have been off having fun, vacationing. And so that's why when I finally got my chance to go to war, I went out there saying that if somebody has to die, let it be me. And again, admittedly naive, you can't control that, but that was my mentality. I mean, I gave away all my stuff. Like it was awkward when I came back home. I'm like, hey, I'm back. I need my stuff back, from all my friends. But I was just ready. And that's how when I came back, I just volunteered to go back. I said, let me go back until essentially if it happens.
So it was actually some survivor's guilt that actually made you feel like you didn't even deserve to come back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that drove you back to that point on the couch with your liter of vodka.
Yeah.
And so, continue the story from there.
So, years later, I started, when the external structures had stopped, I started drinking pretty heavily. I mean, I would go for days on end, drinking like a liter till I pass out, wake up, drink again for 5 to 7 days sometimes until just my body couldn't take it anymore. And then I would be like, okay, something's got to change and sober up. And then this moment was one morning after just 5 days of this, I just thought this pattern of sobering up and drinking would never end. And so I woke up with this bottle and I just was about to walk over to the kitchen, pick up a knife and just slit my wrist and say, there's no point going on. And it shocked me.
Rock bottom.
Rock bottom.
Yeah.
It shocked me that thought would even enter my head.
And that's interesting because you mentioned how that shocked you and that shock was an awareness. It's interesting that you went to war kind of in a way suicide by enemy fire or friendly fire, whatever the case was, how you might die in war. You went to war hoping the war would do it, but the thought of you actually taking your own life was abhorrent to you.
Yeah, right?
It's like, it's interesting.
It would rather, there's this kind of, and again, admittedly, this is a naive perspective on war, but there's this glory, if you will, to dying in combat, right? Like the samurai code, you fight. I mean, samurais or Spartans, 2 tattoos that I have, a Spartan helmet, both warrior cultures that have fought battles dead to the last man, vastly outnumbered in battles dead to the last man. Like there was a notion of glory to that. There's nothing glorious about slitting your own wrist and taking your own life.
Right. So that was almost like a way of redeeming yourself, probably, for things that you'd had unresolved, unforgiven in a way. Like if you could die a warrior's death, then your life had some kind of purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no better way to go than to die in service of something greater than yourself.
Right. And and even if at that point this idea of the actual war, or the actual thing that you were doing was maybe a little bit misguided, still that warrior ethos was like, no, this is the warrior ethos. And this is the way. And I think that's something that for people who, whether you agree with our, decisions to go to war or not, like so many people are like you, like so many of the servicemen and women that are out there, they're doing it with this hero's mindset. They're not like, it may not be a war that you agree with, but the people, like if you actually talk to the people, so many are doing it really for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's about, like, I know, I actually was a history major in undergrad, so I wrote my history thesis on the war. And I had this kind of unique perspective of researching it as well as having experienced it firsthand. And yeah, we shouldn't have been out there, all the politics of the war, I agree. But on the ground, we were doing something. We genuinely wanted to help the people in Iraq. They've been through just hell as a nation, as a people. And we're there to serve for the good of the group. That's what it's about. We join because it's about the people next to you. Yeah. And to fight for that and to live where there's something like incredibly beautiful about living where your well-being is not the priority. What matters is the men and the mission. That's it. Your well-being is a distant third, if not even lower than that. And it's something very powerful to live for something greater than yourself completely like that. That's why it's so hard when you get out. Yeah, because it's hard to kind of create that camaraderie, that brotherhood.
And I think when you talk to a lot of the high-level servicemen and women, it's a lot of what the training is about peeling your own selfish, egoic desires so that you completely dissolve into this group mentality where it's just you fight for each other. And like, that's the thing that matters is the people around you. Like, and I think that's a feeling that I think human beings crave.
Absolutely.
Crave this, like, we think that we want these kind of selfish motives and it's all for me and whatever, but really that's just like a shadow. it's kind of like a shadow representation of what we really want, which is to fight alongside our tribe, our community, and like really serve them in a noble way.
Yeah, that brotherhood, that camaraderie, that brotherhood, sisterhood, but yeah, that camaraderie of serving in something greater, like being a part of that. We are tribal creatures, right? And it's sort of, we live in an environment that cultivates otherwise, that promotes this, selfishness, that promotes our own instant, and we're more lonely than ever before. We're in our little isolation, and that's why, again, that's part of the reason why it's hard coming out of coming out of the military. But I think I would completely agree that we all seek that, and there's something tremendously powerful and beautiful about it.
Yeah. And war has been one of the more reliable ways because it's this strong external point of resistance.
Yeah.
Right. So it forces you to adopt these things because of the external pressure. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like, at what everybody's talking about, from Sebastian Junger and Tribe to Mark Manson and everything is fucked to like all of these things. It's basically like we've lost this kind of external resistance that used to come from nature, used to come from famine, used to come from challenges that we would face. And now we have really luxury and good health care and like all of these different things. And so we're like, what the fuck do I do now?
With greater comfort and excess, we're more lost and essentially weaker than we've ever been. And so war is one avenue that's existed since the beginning of time, and not to, again, condone war itself, but it is a very addictive experience that kind of meets all these human needs. And so when I came back, I had to figure out how do you create the experience of war without the horrors of war? And that's, I think, the beauty. That's what it's about.
Right.
I mean, it's like going to the gym. It's like suffering together as one. You know that. I mean, the way you train too. When you suffer together as one. One of my fitness friends, he says a family that suffers together stays together. And in the military, you see that. But even in fitness, and finding ways to suffer as one creates this dynamic that's you cannot replace elsewhere. So that suffering and pain is just such a beautiful uniter. That's why you see camaraderie like you wouldn't see anywhere else, rarely in the military, because you suffer as one.
And this starts to get into the Fearvana thesis a little bit. But let's go. All right. So where was that aha moment when you're thinking about slitting your wrist?
Yeah.
It turned right there after you hit the rock bottom and you found a little bounce off that rock bottom and you were like, okay, fuck this.
Yeah. So at that point, I realized clearly something needed to change, but it wasn't this one thing happened and suddenly everything shifted overnight. It was a climb out of the abyss, because I drank again. I think it was a week later or something like that. I fell right back into the pit, but that was the trigger that started the climb. That was really rock bottom. And so at this point, I had been seeing a therapist in the Veteran Affairs Administration. And so I'd been seeing a therapist and starting to try to figure out, because to be very frank, what even led me to that was my wife at the time and me were having physical issues, like sexual issues. I wasn't able to, and it wasn't anything to do physically. It was a psychological issue. And so that's what led me to seeing the VA therapist and was going there. And, they were great people, loving people. They wanted to help. They really did. They really were very caring. But what I had come to learn as I started healing myself was that they were just operating from a very bad playbook. Because what would happen is sometimes I would go to the VA therapist and just right after leaving there, I would go straight to the liquor store. Now, I can take responsibility for my actions, but it felt like something wasn't right. Yeah. Something was wrong here. So I started reading books myself and devouring book after book on like neuroscience, on psychology, on spirituality to figure out, heal myself initially and just kind of climb my way out of the darkness. And that's what then led me through this research, through my own life experience of being in the Marines, of having climbed mountains in the Himalayas, skiing across polar ice caps, jumping out of planes, scuba diving under ice, cave diving, you name it, in terms of all these very intense outdoor sports that forced me to engage fear, to test myself. And all these life experiences from joining the Marines too. Even when I joined the Marines, I had 2 doctors tell me that Marine Corps boot camp would kill me because of a blood disorder I have. To this day, I was born with it. And so I had to fight my way to get into the Marines. And all of these experiences taught me with the research that, okay, the darkness, this post-traumatic stress thing that they've told me is a disorder, is something there's value to that. That post-traumatic stress doesn't mean post-traumatic stress disorder. That darkness, that pain, that suffering, that fear, that adversity, stress, all these words, these experiences, these emotions that we demonize, right? Nobody thinks of them as positive emotions, positive experiences. But I learned to shift that. That's the whole ethos of Fearvana, like fear and nirvana, 2 seemingly contradictory ideas, but fear, and ultimately at a meta level, suffering of any kind is the true access point to bliss and enlightenment, and it's not the enemy. It's a resource that we need to learn to harness and embrace, to use to create a happier life. And it's in fact the most important skill to master, because if you can, like I like to say, suffer well, if you can suffer well, you can handle life when it punches you in the face, and you can handle any worthy challenge. I mean, building a business, training hard, anything worthwhile is hard. And if you're able to smile in the face of that struggle, life inherently becomes more enjoyable no matter what. And there's beauty even in the pain. Like you can smile even when you're in the suck.
Yeah. That's, so that's something that the Stoics cover, know, and have been talking about for a long time. And I think one of the really important distinctions there is a lot of times we think, okay, you suffer because, and then you have the other reason. But and I think this is one of the reasons probably why your book starts with acceptance. Like, before you start jumping ahead to why and like what you're going to do with it, which is helpful and like definitely a necessary part of the process, there's a certain acceptance that you need to have and an embrace of the suffering and the darkness itself, right? Like, it's not like, I'm fucking tolerating this for this thing. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. But like, just kind of like embrace the suck, full stop.
Yeah. Just the acceptance of the isness of life, the isness of the experience, whatever the experience is. So like as an ultra runner, you're 50 miles into a run, everything hurts. The fastest way out of that pain is to accept that the pain is there. And just this thing is there. And same thing with like everything, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical, or whatever the suffering is, accepting the isness of it. I mean, even like, for example, my guilt, right? Everybody had told me you shouldn't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. It's not your fault. And again, rationally, I get it. Like, I fully get the nature of war rationally. Emotionally, it doesn't change the fact, because guilt is an expression of love. I mean, the only reason I felt that was because it was an expression of true love. And that's what survivor's guilt is. I mean, it's not just veterans who feel it. People who've lost somebody often question, why me instead of that why am I alive? Why did that person die? And so survivor's guilt is an expression of love, but accepting the isness of it instead of trying to fight it allowed me to then do something with it. And whatever the pain that shows up is just, okay, this thing is there. Stress is there, fear is there, whatever is there. Great. Let me be with it.
I have to admit that, for me, I think one of the paths forward for me to really reach the next levels of my own potential is I will put myself in uncomfortable positions. So I've kind of got that part, and that's like a key part of this thing is like, put yourself in uncomfortable positions, go out and seek the struggle, or the struggle will find you. That's the part that you talk about, right? Like, if you're not out there looking for it, it's going to come to your door, and it's going to be worse, so you might as well go out there and look at it. But I think, despite the fact that I have that ethos of like tilting my lance toward whatever I'm afraid of or whatever is going to be uncomfortable, whether that's open relationship or psychedelic medicine or a sweat lodge or the business or being vulnerable or whatever the fuck that thing is, I still, if I'm uncomfortable or I still want to get out of there as fast as fucking possible, rather than just being like, okay, no, this is uncomfortable. It's okay. You know?
No, I get it. And so the way to train at that, I recently kind of coined this word and this concept and have been practicing it, is something I call meta suffering. So meta is rising above the thing to look at the thing, right? Like, that's what meta is, to look above. Like, so meta learning is learning how to learn. So meta suffering is to experience the suffering that adds pain to the suffering. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So running ultra marathons, to me, it sucks. It's still hard, but it's a suffering I'm comfortable with, right? So even writing this book, for example, I used to procrastinate on writing by running a marathon. And I would justify myself that, hey, I'm still doing something. It's still work. I'm still suffering. It's still struggle. But it was bullshit. I was lying to myself. What I really needed to do was the worthy suffering, which was writing the book. And so when you practice meta suffering, it actually trains you to embrace the suffering more in the convention, in like the suffering that you're used to, if that makes sense. So like, I'll give you examples of it. Like doing the rowing machine, for example. Rowing is an experience of meta suffering for me. I hate it. I'm no good at it. It sucks. And I don't care about being great at it. It doesn't tie into my pursuit of running. But the reason why I do it is it trains me in the experience of meta suffering. Or for example, a few months ago, I spent 7 days in pitch darkness, isolation, and silence. Like, just, it's called a darkness retreat. Just complete darkness, dark therapy.
Yeah,
you know, like exactly. But this was like, I
want to do do that.
You would love it. You would.
I don't know if I would love it, but if I had that attitude, I would love it.
You would love it, but but I mean, it's intense. But what's really powerful, and you'll dig this too, is when you're in darkness for extended periods of time, your brain naturally starts to release DMT, which of course you're familiar with, one of the primary ingredients of ayahuasca, and you go on these psychedelic trips in pitch darkness. Like as a small example of that, I know we got sidetracked with delving down this rabbit hole, but it's cool stuff, is like on day 5 of the darkness retreat, it was so blindingly bright. Like I felt like I needed eye mask to sleep. I was literally touching my eyelids like this to see, are they open, are they closed? And I was going like this, but obviously you can't cover the light because their light was really within, right?
Yeah.
And so in the dark, and that was just one experience. I mean, day 6, day 7, I'm seeing red and green lights everywhere. And it's as real as anything, as this mic, as anything. Wow. And it's just completely surreal. And it's a really profound experience to really get to feel and know at a deep level that darkness and light can coexist as one. And I think the true spiritual awakening is to recognize the singularity, the oneness of all dualities. And when you recognize the oneness of all dualities, that, and in every kind of duality, that's how you find the spiritual awakenings. And the darkness retreat was a profound example of that. And for me, it was a deep experience in meta suffering as well, because stillness is hard. I was like, it's easier for me to go running than to sit still in a damn, like, I mean, even at the darkness retreat for the first 2 days, I was doing workouts, like doing burpees and stuff like that. And then I was like, wait a second, you're only doing this because that's comfortable for you. Yes, burpees are hard, but that was comfortable. So I was like, you're not going to escape the stillness by working out. So for the next 5 days, I didn't do a single like bit of exercise, not push-ups, anything, because I realized I was escaping from the stillness and I wouldn't allow myself to do that.
Yeah.
So meta suffering.
Yeah. That's something that I think is really fucking cool. First of all, where did you go for this darkness retreat?
It was a place in Germany.
Okay. Yeah, I heard there's a place in Czech Republic.
There's a few in Eastern Europe, some in Central America, because you can't, it's not just like going into your room and sitting in the darkness, because you have to create an environment that's pitch dark.
Yeah. And then people have to provide you food. Yeah,
bring you the food and stuff like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to do that.
It was awesome.
I don't want to do that, but I know that like that would be good.
You'll get a lot from it. Exactly.
Especially also, there's benefits. I have trouble sleeping and stuff. So the idea of having no day, no night, just massive your body starts producing massive amounts of melatonin. So I'll just sleep whenever. I don't know what the fuck time it is, but whatever. I'll sleep when I sleep, and when I don't sleep, I don't sleep, and I'm just going to be in darkness anyways. Nothing else I'm going to do.
Nothing else to do.
And I think that constant pressure that I feel, because there's that kind of the fear that actually like is that I find helpful. It's that kind of like that nervousness. You tell the story of like you're about to go on stage. There's that kind of those butterflies that eustress they call it. That's like this positive thing. Like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and this thing's going to be gnarly. And it could be before a workout. It could be before any even a medicine journey, whatever it is. Like there's that kind of rush that goes with you, but. For me, the fear that is less useful is the constant, unending, unceasing anxiety that says you should be doing more. You're not doing enough. Like, like that thing in the darkness, I know I'll have I can't even read. There's nothing that I can do. Exactly. So I'm imagining that would be just a great thing for me to just get in a place where I literally can't do anything.
Oh, it's very profound. And what it teaches you, because I can relate completely to this, I need to do more all the time kind of anxiety, right? And this ties back into what we were talking about with the duality. So I actually call this concept, eventually I'm going to write another book about this, but the paradox of singular duality. So the idea is there's all these dualities in the world, right? Like ego, humility, darkness, light, life, death, surrender, control. So for example, this thing, like I need to control, I need to do more, I need to do more, I need to do more. And then practicing the whatever duality you find yourself like you find yourself on one spectrum of a duality. So for example, let's look at the duality of suffering and play, right? Like this duality of that. I am big into the suffering, into the darkness, into the struggle, to the point that it was getting really hard to enjoy everything. In fact, one of the biggest awakenings I got in the darkness retreat was actually not my demons and stuff that came up, because I had done a lot of work processing those demons. But what came up for me was permission to be happy. Because for a long time in my life, I have struggled. To this day, it's still something I have to kind of be conscious of, but I've struggled with being happy because I've felt there's so much pain in the world. I've seen a lot of it externally and internally, and I feel like why do I deserve to be happy when there's so many other people suffering? What right do I have, right? That's kind of that same area of survivor's guilt, but transitioning at a larger lens. But in the darkness, I got permission to be happy, to allow myself to experience the light, right? So whatever the duality, in your case, like, okay, this this constantly need to do more, and whatever, maybe like, okay, I need to struggle, find one duality in this. I actually have a list on my phone of like just tons of dualities. Every time I experience something in life, I'll write down this dualities in this huge list, and choose one, find which spectrum that you're on leaning towards. So for me, example, it was suffering, right? Big into suffering, and start exploring the other extreme of that spectrum. So play. So embracing play more, embracing the lighter side more. Like sometimes when I go to certain retreats, our mutual friend Hal, who connected us, at his event, they do a lot of dancing and stuff. I was horribly uncomfortable. I was like, I'd rather be doing burpees. I don't want nothing to do with this dancing. Yeah. And I was like, all right, stop it. Embrace the play, embrace the light. Because when you do that, when you push far into the other end of the duality, you can start figuring out where on the line you'll be. Now, I'll always be somebody who will lean towards the suffering side of that particular duality, right? Sure. And that's fine. But by engaging the other side, I'm at least able to experience the range of the human experience and find where do I fit in that duality. And there's tons of duality. So explore each one and you'll find where your line is, and we'll all have different spots. And also
taste the birthright of being human, right? Like we're not supposed to just experience one side we're supposed to experience all the sides. So like let yourself fucking taste it. It's like we have a full buffet and we only eat from one half of it. Like there's a whole other half if you want. And you're like, no. Those foods are not good. I don't want those foods. Like we haven't fucking tried them.
Yeah, exactly.
Get in there and like at least taste it, and then you can find where you actually want to be.
Yeah, I love the way you put it. And also, it's like this thing that's like, yes, seek out your strengths, find your strengths, and push into them, but don't completely eliminate exploring those weaker sides. Like tap into them, explore, because then you get to experience that buffet of the human experience. The human condition is magnificent and limitless. Like what we can experience, the range of it is just incredible. So find those areas that are just, I'm not saying that in more work, I challenge I channel my strengths, but find those other areas of your weaknesses, of the other side of those dualities, and experience it. And it will allow you to only become better at your strengths. Like, for example, even if you look at the duality of like stillness and chaos, if you will, but stillness and control, stillness is not slowing you down. There's a difference between being still and doing nothing. Like coming out of this darkness retreat will only speed you up. But it allows you to experience the other side of that, and you'll find the beauty in that dance.
Yeah. I mean, that's the key and just being willing to do that. And for a lot of people, I teach ecstatic dance, which is something I don't know if that's exactly the container that Hal teaches. It might have been just more playful with your eyes open, but this is more like dark room, like the ability to freely express and all of these limitations that we have. I think the value of that comes from the discomfort in moving your body in a certain way and not being a good dancer and not performing like it's so you think you could dance, right? The value comes from pushing yourself through the discomfort of it. Yeah. And that's what really makes it good. So people ask like, oh, should I take a substance, for this? I was like, no. Like anything that would like smooth the edges and like prevent the discomfort of it. Like, if you're dancing and you're hammered, it's like, who cares? Exactly. It's easy, right?
The best dancer in the world.
Exactly, right? So like, that's what you'll see. You'll see people who've never danced before at a wedding. They'll be hammered and they'll just be dancing, and it'll be like, that's good. Like, at least they're dancing, that's fine. But the real value of it comes from when you push through those discomforts and limitations that you have without any help. Because then you have to face square in the eye that level of discomfort that you've had. And that's where the benefit comes from. Exactly. That's where the gold is.
Exactly. And it's just a different kind of, if you want to call it suffering, right? But it's a different kind of struggle to experience, whether it be dancing or working out in the gym, whatever it may be. And so the invitation is to explore all of that. Right. And fear is so interesting, like fear of dancing. Is a real fucking thing. It's dancing, everybody. It's dancing, And I know tons of people, like a lot of the men that I lead through these dances, like they will go to, if I said, all right, we're going to a gym, we got a workout test called the acid bath, and it's these 3 like really intense, kind of metrics that you're trying to do as fast as you can on the erg bike, on the ski erg, and on the rower, like back to back to back, and see how many meters you can rack up in this, and how fast you can do it. Yeah. And they'd be like, fuck yeah, let's go, and it'd be like this. But they're like, okay, now we're going to put on music and you're going to dance as freely as you can. And they're like, fuck you. I'm out. I'm fucking out of here. So again, it's they're comfortable with one type of suffering, but they're not comfortable with another type. Yeah. And that might be
a lot of people are uncomfortable with the fear of letting somebody love them.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's terrifying. And of course, I think we've all found ourselves in that position where we're like, oh, no. Because if you actually allow that love in, you experience the love, you can be terrified that it's going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I went through a very challenging, in fact, this is what drove me to the Darkness Retreat. I went through a very challenging divorce last year. And I ended up breaking my sobriety. And I was like, some gap is really there. And now coming out of that, you know, it's hard to try to open yourself up to that again because, man, when it goes, it sucks. It was heartbreaking.
Well, it's the best feeling in the universe.
Yeah.
Love. And love is that thing that the moment you receive it, you're giving it. The moment you give it, you receive it. It's just it's a state of, it's not like something you possess. It's a state of expression.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're there in love, then you're in bliss.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the absolute best feeling.
It's so all-consuming.
It's
right?
all-consuming bliss, you know? And so when you're there, and so the way that the human mind works, when we have something that's so good, we're going to be fucking terrified
that it's going to go away.
that it's going to go away. And then eventually it will go away, most likely, at least. But the love never actually went away. It's just that person that allowed you to access that expression went away.
Yeah, I love
but
that.
the world itself is just an opportunity inviting you to engage in love, like Rumi, the great poet. You know, the great beloved was not a person; it was the world. You know, and like when you have that and recognize that, well, then you can be in love with anybody and anything. You can be in love with a fucking tree and like, fucking this is good. Sunshine and the ocean and all of this.
Yeah.
But really, we kind of try and condense love to these special people or this special place or this special thing or this, and it's natural and it's normal to do that. But
I think that's where also like wrestling this duality of the external internal is that attaching this love. Yes, there can be external things that you love, but really it's about what's happening here. That's where it's really coming from. That it's not, you know, not attached to this one person or this one thing. That like you said, that when it truly is all consuming, and by no means am I there, but you can love the tree, love everything equally, like love all of it because it's internal. It's in the beingness, right?
Right.
And so engaging, and that's why again, you need to come back to stillness. You need to go within. But we're living in a world with so many distractions today, and sometimes even the positive things you do can just be a way to run away from yourself, to go within, to do that inner work. You know what I mean? And we're always looking to fill that void with something. Sometimes it's unhealthy ways like drinking, drugs, whatever, and God knows I've been there. But other times it's even the positive ways like running, working out, working on your business. That can be, I mean, again, if you're not really doing it from that conscious awareness, it could be just another tool to run away from the true inner work of tapping into your beingness, of seeing what's in that space instead of trying to run away from that space and fill that space.
Yeah.
You got to go into that space.
Yeah. All right. So when you're looking at your own now, obviously with the divorce and with the challenges of that, when you're looking into your fear about opening yourself up to love, you know, what is the Fearvana method? Like, what are your own words of advice that you would give to yourself in this position?
Yeah. So I'm seeing somebody now. And the first date that I went on with her, I was beyond terrified. I'm going on a date with like a nice date in San Francisco. And I was like, my self-talk was like, dude, you've been to war. You've spent 7 days in darkness. You run ultra marathons. Get your shit together, man. So that was my self-talk, you know? But like what I've realized is that like now, even like I'm completely open. I'm fully expressed in it. And the fear, it will be there. It'll always show up. So I like what I would say to myself, somebody says, what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? You know, dig into the fear. Be with that fear. Don't try to run away from it. And it's natural to feel it. Again, like you said, it's normal to feel it. So allow yourself to feel it fully. You're afraid. Okay, cool. What if you do lose it? Even if this falls apart, right? Even if this relationship falls apart, even my next, let's say, even if this one and the 20 after this fall apart, I would rather experience the momentary like beauty and immerse myself so fully in this, knowing that if the fear is there or not is irrelevant, because it's not about why fear is there, how fear is there. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, cool, right? But when it's there, let it be there and allow myself to feel so fully the expression of this moment, knowing that the beauty is in the rewards of that. Like that's Fearvana. Fearvana is like a good analogy that I like to always say is like jumping out of a plane. Like when I went skydiving, I felt terrified while I'm sitting in the plane, but as soon as you jump, you're not really scared anymore, but you're just flying and it's amazing. Like that's the bliss, right? That's the Fearvana. So you face the fear and you just be with it. You can, I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do to like in terms of certain techniques like visualize, but in the case of love, I think it's just when you allow yourself to fully feel it, that itself becomes the everything, the essence. I mean, the experience of Fearvana is being so immersed in the moment that it's like the now and the not now coexist as one, right? Like the duality of the now and the not now being past or future, but they come together. And just the isness of that is so worth it. So I might have a fear still that'll fall, but can I wrestle with that fear and can I say that, is this worth it? Is this, and it is. Even if it falls apart, I will do like the next one. If, again, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, then how many ever times it may be is that it will be worth it. And I think that also when you truly come, because like the challenge with being in a relationship versus other kinds of fear experiences, you're engaged with another human being. With another human being comes their own lens of the world, their own context, their own baggage, their own stuff, all that stuff, right? It's different than me writing a book or jumping out of a plane or running ultra marathons. So you have to deal with that, and you can't control that. You can't obviously control how another person's going to be. But I think that if you, like sort of that Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see in the world, when I've allowed myself to be fully expressed, vulnerable, authentic, like she's told me, I've shared things with you that I've never shared with anybody else. It just invites other people to do the same. Yeah. When you share yourself so openly and allow yourself to be like, to immerse, like to let that be all consuming. And that's like the beauty of experiencing life at its extremes is like the one reason why I love suffering and pain is because it's so all consuming. There's like a purity to pain. When you're really in it, you have nowhere to go because it sucks. It fills your soul because you're in that pain. But love on the other extreme is the same thing. But you can only get that when you experience it at the extremes and allow yourself to be so fully immersed in it. Otherwise, you're lost. You know?
And it's I think that's the place for courage on both of those sides too, because however you want to define courage, I like thinking of it like action rather than retraction in the face of fear, or like openness rather than closingness in the face of your fear. So in the face of your fear about love, like one way you can do it is you can close off and not let that love in, and then that will, in your mind, diminish the amount of pain that you'll feel on the other side, right? But that's not courage. Courage is to open wide the fuck open and just let it all in and let yourself feel it, cast its light and warmth on every nook and cranny, every corner of your entire being, and just let it all soak in as deeply as you can. Like that's courage. Absolutely. Knowing that, all right, there may be pain on the other side, but guess what? You can apply the same thing to the pain on the other side. When you feel that way, you don't have to go out fucking drinking, raging with your buddies, or trying to find some other girl or guy or whoever you want to be with to escape from it. You can just allow the pain and allow the grief and allow the sadness to soak through every part of you and allow yourself to feel it, rather than trying to change your state. Yeah. Running away from that thing, just like open yourself up to the feeling itself. Yeah.
And you recognize that if you don't open yourself up to the fear, the potential, the perceived risk of engaging in this love, the struggle is there anyway. Like you said, you're closing up, you're hiding yourself, and that struggle is real. Like we all know that. Like if you try to do that, you're suffering anyway. Yeah. Like one way or the other, you're going to suffer. So embrace the worthy suffering. Embrace the suffering that's at least worth the experience. Open yourself up. And again, the risk that it might fall apart is a perceived risk. You don't know that, right? Because we imagine a future based on references from the past. So, hey, clearly every relationship I've been in hasn't worked. Hence, I'm here, right? So now that perception can shape my decision in the now based on a perceived fear of the future. But if I allow myself to let that control, then that suffering is overriding the worthy suffering of just engaging the courage of being so fully expressed. And like going on that date, like I said, man, I mean, the anxiety I felt was visceral. Sitting in the Uber, driving over there, like, and I was like, dude, come on. But I went, and it was so worth it. Here we are, So,
what is your, you talk a lot about, the way that we use words, and so I imagine in your self-talk is also very important because and you have some great cases in here about how language actually can affect your performance on how you take a test, how you look at yourself, how you do anything. Like the way that you not only are using words for the present and the future, but also using the words to categorize your past changes your experience of the past, and then changes your likelihood to perform and experience something in the future. Yeah. So do you have like practices and things that you do to kind of alter the words that you're using to surround different situations?
Yeah, very much so. I will say things like I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Or sometimes in certain contexts I'll talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, but if within myself, I will never say I'm an alcoholic. I don't like that when, I use that label, I'm an alcoholic. I will never say to myself I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I would never say I struggle with depression, even though I have incredibly low moments from, like, dude, 2 days ago, I just posted this video on YouTube, actually. I was sitting in my room just crying, just tearing up with this deep, deep, deep low. But I won't use those labels, because when we say a label to the self, that label becomes our self-identity. And we see this all the time. Like, I've worked with people with all range of mental health issues. This one young kid who would say, she was labeled with depression, and she'll say, I have depression, or I am depressed. And the problem is that label then becomes her self-identity. It becomes the nature of who she is, as opposed to saying, look, my brain goes through a state of depression. My brain is addicted, but I am not my brain. My brain is not me. Like, recognizing this thing, this is fundamental, to say that we are not our thoughts, our feelings, or our experiences. We are the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, and the experiencer of our experiences. There's a space between what is and who we choose to be outside of what is. And the words we use shape the isness of that. So, for example, even sleep, if I'm talking to people, I'll say sleep. But if you look at my calendar when I have it scheduled, it says dream yoga session. To myself, I don't call it sleep. I call it dream yoga, which is a practice of lucid dreaming, to allow yourself to become conscious in your dream state. By no means am I master at it, but I don't use that terminology to myself, because why would I call it sleep? To me, it's dream yoga. Yeah. In every way, I'm looking at how are my words shaping my experience of life, and my experience ultimately of my relationship to myself and to the external world as well. And the thing with that also to be careful is, though, that the negative words people will say this is, like, for example, one of my self-talks is, well, now not so much because I'm pretty fit, but especially when I had some more weight to lose, I would look in the mirror and I'd be like, you're a fat piece of shit, get your ass to the gym, right? Now that's by most people's standards, that's a negative way to say to yourself. But it's not about negative or positive. It's about empowering or disempowering. This ties into what we were saying about embracing the darkness. The darkness, these negative things, can actually have a lot of value and can be very empowering. But that's about our own relationship to those words. To some people, looking in the mirror and saying you're a fat piece of shit to yourself might destroy your soul. To me, that works. But you have to find the duality. And I'll give you another great example of this. So, last year, I spent a week running about a marathon a day across Liberia. It was 167 miles to help build a school out there, raise funds for that, and we're doing a lot of humanitarian work. And it was about day 4 of the run. I had this aching pain in my shin. It just hit. I was maybe 17, 18 miles in for the day. Aching pain hits, and I'm like, it just stopped me from my running. I stopped, tried to take off my shoes, massage it, put cream, nothing's going away. And I had to hit my mileage for the day. So I started limping, and the whole time limping, I'm like, fuck, I have the psychological torture of I have a lot more miles to go, and the physical torture of the pain. So I'm navigating this. I'm limping for about 1.5 miles, and then I start, all right, let me just jog. And I jog slowly. And then I start picking it up, and I'm sprinting, booking it as fast as you can possibly go. And I'm saying, and my conversation at the time is saying things to myself like, remember Neil? Neil is my friend who died in the war. I said, remember Neil? That should have been you who died instead of him. Earn this life. Suck it up. People are suffering right now everywhere. You have no right to bitch and complain. Earn this. If you quit now, you deserve nothing more than a coward's death. Having this self-talk to myself about saying to myself that you should have died in the war, you didn't die, so earn this damn life and suck it up. That's dark, that's negative, but there was value in that. Those 5 miles I ran were the fastest 5 miles I ran the entire trip. So sometimes you have to go to those spaces, but only when you engage those spaces consciously can you then choose when you want to engage them. So one of the other exercises I do to engage it consciously is I'll watch scenes from war movies knowing they will make me cry, like Hacksaw Ridge or Black Hawk Down. It tears me up. But what I'm doing is, just like we train our muscles, I'm training an emotion. I'm training to be in that space because there's value in that space. So by training in it, I can consciously engage it at will.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I used to do something similar, and I want to ask you about whether those practices have a hangover. Because I noticed that when I would do something similar, I'd get a little bit of it would work, but I would get a little bit of a hangover. So in the gym sometimes to motivate myself in, let's say, even if it was a heavy bag session, that was one of the places I would do it, or some kind of high intensity repetitive action that was relatively safe, right? Because obviously I'm not trying to CrossFit my way into a fucking back brace, but so I'd find something, let's say it was the heavy bag. And then I would imagine in my head that the person I love the most, let's say my girl at the time, or like some innocent, my family, something like that. And I would just imagine that there was this flood of people coming, and I had to fight to the death to save them and to keep them alive. And I would just allow rage, like all of this rage and all of this violence and anger and everything that I could to fill me until I was like tears were streaming down my face, and I was hitting it past the point that I had any right to be even moving anymore, because my lactate was up, my max heart rate was up, but I was just going and going and going till I was just absolutely just finished. And I'd have some like really intense music on, theme from Braveheart or 300 or something going on in my headphones, and I would allow myself to do that, and it was this amazing release, and it was really powerful. But I felt like sometimes after I did that, there'd be like a little bit of a hangover. Like there'd be like a little bit of a residue from having gone that level, even though I was doing it consciously. Yeah. So do you encounter any of that at all?
I understand what you mean. It's a great point. So I think I haven't mastered this yet myself. It's still a practice, but is finding the other spectrum of that duality to be able to access it when you need it, right? Like, so tapping into I've gotten into the space of intense rage, right? Like, and I needed to go there. There was value in it. But what's the thing to temper that? And finding the triggers, just like the trigger to get in the space of rage. You're imagining people attacking your family. You're hitting this thing, like you're comfortable, but that's more your comfort zone, because, like you said, you're more comfortable with the suffering, with the struggle. Right. So for you, seeking, and this is the same thing I'm working on right now, is seeking what are the triggers for bliss, for play, for light, for joy, whatever it may be, and being able to go to those spaces a little bit more. You know, like one of the things I do between work breaks is I'll watch like a short clip from stand-up comedy, like a Bill Burr or something like that, just to laugh, because like happiness is my discomfort. And again, that sounds very weird to most people, but to engage dopamine, just to allow dopamine to hit that laughter. So giving myself the space to activate certain triggers to go on the other side. And then when you truly master it, and like in the darkness, I actually experienced this, where I could shift from thought to thought to thought without leaving a thought residue. So I'm sitting, I mean, it sounds like a crazy person, but I'm sitting in the dark going like, this thought is there. And I wasn't talking, right? So it's just a thought. Let me instantly shift this thought. Is there a thought residue? Nope. Let me pause my thought, and I would be able to silence the mind for longer than I would in this world. For a good, I don't have a sense of time truly, but silence the mind completely. And then maybe a thought would show up again. Okay, thought's there again. And just going in those spaces where, again, that's what that is ultimately just training, right? So training yourself to control the flow of those thoughts, the emotions, to instantly shut it off without leaving the residue of it.
I think that's really, really smart. And actually, when I think about other instances that I'll use, so I have a lot of, and again, I'm talking about ecstatic dance again, but it's really applicable because in certain ecstatic dances, I'll have very heavy like songs that are designed to elicit certain incredibly strong emotions. But at the end of the playlist, it's usually coming out to a celebration and elation, and the music and the surrender to the music and surrendering my own emotional state to what is actually playing on the playlist that I've curated on this like arc of this hero's journey, which includes the, approach to the inmost cave and the ordeal and all of that. And then it has the moment of the seizing of the sword. And then it has the celebration as you return home with the elixir. Like I surrender to that arc. And then I end with this really powerful experience where I've gone into the darkness and I've come out of the darkness and triggered that. But as you say that, I realize while my playlists do that, I also don't have particularly the intentional triggers that I probably could develop to like trigger play. Yeah. Like what is my play trigger? Yeah. Where I'm just going to play and I'm going to laugh and I'm going to have fun now. Yeah. Like I can trigger that blood rage workout, like I know how to trigger, I know how to trigger that one, but can I trigger like levity and and lightness and happiness and like play and playfulness? Like, man, I guess I haven't really practiced that yet. And it reminds me also too of, I did a little training with someone who trained with some Siberian mystic teachers, and she would try and train me to go from emotion to emotion. And you'd start a little slower, like, sit 2 minutes with each emotion, like deep sadness or deep jealousy or deep anger. But you'd go one from one, then you go to happiness, and then you go to joy, and then you go to fear, and then you go to this, and then she would speed it up. Okay, now 30 seconds. Okay, now 10 seconds. Now so you'd get used to like switching from one to the other, and the practice was to teach you how to actually change your emotional state at
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that reminds me of kind of what you were doing, where you're like switching the thoughts, you know, but I guess it's like they're switching the thoughts and then they're switching the feelings that are associated with the thoughts too. And the skill is to be able to do both, because the thoughts usually are like leading the feelings, but sometimes the feelings, then you have a feeling first and then you create all these thoughts and stories to justify around that feeling. So one could be a priori to the other. You don't really know.
Yeah.
But the ability to switch either one with your own conscious triggers, well, that's a level of mastery there.
Yeah. Absolutely, you know, and creating, like, music is a very powerful trigger for me as well. Like, I have songs that will put me into different states at will, you know, so allowing to do that. And once you really master that, I mean, you get to create the states that you want to be in anytime, you know, and there's incredible power. Like, even, for example, before we got here and me speaking, I listened to a very particular series of songs before every interview I do. It's from Black Hawk Down, Hacksaw Ridge, and there's this part in Black Hawk Down at the end of the movie where he says, you know, people don't understand why we do. It's about the men next to you. And so it reminds me, why am I doing this? Because it's about people who are suffering and hearing this message right now. So putting myself in those states, and music is a great trigger to do it. But yeah, that's the highest form of mastery, to be able to control your internal state regardless of external. So one way I also train in this is, like, for example, recently I ran 80 miles around a 0.2 mile loop. It was my building in India, just 0.2 miles, just going 400 laps around this damn thing. Psychological torture. Most of it was no music or anything. So you're just looking at this damn thing over and over and over again. I'm not by any means there yet, but the goal that I want to do is to be able to, whether I'm running in the most epic, beautiful nature, or whether I'm running 80 miles around a 0.2 mile loop in a building, the internal experience of that is the same. And that's what it takes, that mastery of the mind, the emotion, the thought, and to recognize that we are not those things, like, allows you, it's the kind of the duality of the self and the not self. They both have value. This is also ties into, like, one other, I'm going on many tangents, but I think it's important, is that, like, the ego is often demonized as something negative, right? But if you look at the duality of ego and humility, ego is worth embracing. If you want to do something great, you have to own your greatness. You have to believe your greatness. You have to tap into that ego. And so the self, you can only transcend the self with the true mastery over the self, right? So self-transcendence happens as a result of acknowledging and mastering the self. Then you can
embracing
transcend
all
the
your
self.
shadow elements,
exactly,
including your ego.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty essential. I remember there's a part in the book where you talk about this guy who, and you probably know his name, but he designs workouts to create the experience of the bargaining, whether you're going to continue with the workout or not.
Yeah.
and I think that's like a really cool concept, because that point of bargaining with yourself, and like whether you win or lose that battle, is actually going to be played out in the point of bargaining with every aspect, whether you're looking to write your book or looking to launch your project or looking to ask that girl out or do whatever there's always that point of bargaining. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And if you train the, like, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
And that's also, like, one of the effective ways to work out is with a training partner, but that training partner will easily hold you accountable. Right. Yeah. But you're not going to have a writing partner who's going to be there in your ear, be like, we're writing right now. Right. I mean, I guess you could create that.
Writing is a little bit of a lonely.
It's a little bit of it's a solitary thing,
exactly,
you know, like, and so many of these decisions are solitary. Like, sometimes you'll have a wingman to go talk to two girls, but sometimes you're just going to be right by your fucking self. And there's going to be a pretty girl and you're going to get that feeling like, you should go talk to her. And you're like, oh, no, you know, you're busy. You got other stuff to do. And you have that bargaining moment. You know, but if you can learn to master that bargaining moment and go, oh, this is uncomfortable, all the more reason that I should fucking do it.
You know? And put yourself in those situations where you're forced to bargain with yourself and see what shows up. You know, sometimes maybe you'll quit, but you'll learn something even if you do.
Yeah.
And so keep going into those spaces.
Yeah. There's a big thesis of the book that I wrote too, about the bargaining moment right before you turn the shower nozzle cold for your cold shower, or right before you go in the cold plunge. You're going to be bargaining like a motherfucker with yourself at that point. You know, it's just going to be all kinds of things running through your head. Yeah. Am I going to do it? Am I going to do it?
This is going to suck. Yeah.
Eventually, through practice, though, you don't even think about it. Like, it's not even a moment. It's like the mind will be like, but, and you're like, whatever. Yeah, you know, and you just turn it, and you're just going to do it. No matter what. Yeah. And I think that's the place you want to get to avoid that kind of bargaining fatigue.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, that
It is,
resistance.
that decision fatigue, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just that much easier to just take the decision and step into the suck of whatever.
Yeah.
And then just, let go of the inner conflict, that inner
Yeah,
chaos,
you know what's
that
you know
monkey
what's
mind.
like way worse than the cold is like arguing about whether you're going to
What
go
are
in
you
the
gonna
cold for fucking 3 minutes
Yeah,
before you do it.
exactly.
It's way worse than the cold.
Exactly. The anticipation of the suck is so much worse.
So
Exactly.
much worse. If you're just like
Absolutely.
whatever, like we're going
Yeah,
in,
just-
we're
yeah,
doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah. I have to ask you. So tell me the story. You got a quote from the Dalai Lama and a forward from the Dalai Lama. How'd you make that happen?
Yeah, so it actually ties into a lot about that bargaining. So I'll kind of full thing. So first part was when I had the concept of Fearvana. I thought this is a really spiritual concept. It'd be really cool to have who's the spiritual leader, in the world, the Dalai Lama. It'd be really cool to get an endorsement from him. But immediately I shut that down. I had no platform. I was an unknown. Nobody knew me. I was like, there's no way I can get the Dalai Lama. Who am I? So I was like, all right, whatever. Let me try some other names. And so I was reaching out to people who had made an impact in my life. So I reached out to like Seth Godin, Jack Canfield. Seth Godin gave me my first endorsement. I was really blessed because I love Seth. I think he's an amazing human being. And that then instilled a bit of confidence in me. Because okay, if that can happen, why not try the next thing? And sort of a key lesson I want to point out there is that you don't need confidence to take action. Confidence is the result of the action, not the fuel for the action, right? So like get the confidence later. And after that, so I was like, all right, let me try. And I reached out to the Dalai Lama's email, like on his website. They kind of got me nowhere. So I did hours of research and found a name and an email at His Holiness's office of a monk out there. I shot a personal video sharing my story, everything I've been through, the struggles, what we want to do with Fearvana. All the profits from the book are going to charity and worthy causes we support. So just shared my story. Then this monk connected me to like 3 other monks, going down this, one person to the next. And then 5 months of building a relationship with this monk there. Every time he didn't write me, I was like, they hate my book. They hate me. They're ignoring me. They don't like, that inner stuff, right? We have that stuff. That self-doubt will be there. It's still there. I'm now in a much better space. Like Fearvana is doing very well, but I still have the self-doubt. And it's okay. You can be with the self-doubt, but not let it define you. So I would follow up anyway. And finally, after like 5 months of building a relationship with the monk there, he said to me, like, this is exactly what he wrote, was considering everything you've been through and your genuine desire to serve, I'll press your case. And when he said that, a few weeks later, I got like this beautiful letter in the mail with the Dalai Lama seal and signature. And he ended up writing the foreword for the book. I only asked for a 1-line endorsement, but he wrote the foreword for the book. And it was just so, like, just personally and, spiritually very humbling and just an honor. But of course, also just a game changer in terms of the marketing of the book, especially starting with like nothing, no platform,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful story of like, again, you had those bargaining moments with yourself
exactly.
and you decided to just push through.
Yeah.
And as soon as we make that decision that we can't go back from, I think there's a great quote from Viktor Frankl in here. And it's when you know that the external circumstance can't change, the internal circumstance.
Your attitude.
You have to change your attitude towards it, right? Like, so you have this fixed thing like, nope, I'm going to try my very hardest and my very best to get the Dalai Lama to endorsement, right? But at that point, then you just have to adjust yourself because you know that that's a fixed point that you're not going to bargain with anymore. Exactly. And that's the value of the ethos, right? Like if you have a really strong ethos, I think that's something that, obviously you're a fan of Spartan culture as well, but like the understanding that they're never going to give up and never going to surrender. Yeah. Well, that bargaining was out. Yeah. So then it's about like, all right, well, how do I accept this reality? Yeah. In that case, and then that really freed them up to be, the legendary warriors that they were.
And a key point to kind of echo that is to get clarity on what your ethos is. I think a lot of people don't have clarity on what is your ethos, what is your driving philosophy that defines you as a being, right? Spend some time. That's probably one of the most valuable things you do. Spend some time getting clear on that. Like, what is that? Then that becomes your North Star. It becomes your compass. Like for me, if I had to summarize my philosophy in one line, it's that the path to inner peace is the pursuit of a worthy inner war. You need that pursuit of that inner war, and that's everything. So it's like, it's my North Star. Am I pursuing that inner war today? Have I pursued it? Am I pursuing it tomorrow? How do I continue to pursue it? And sometimes the inner war might be joy. Sometimes the inner war might be going to hard workout. Sometimes the inner war might be going on a date. You know what I mean? Like, but the path to true inner peace is the pursuit of that inner war. And that's my compass, So get clarity on that. Then that guides you. That guides everything. And the worst case, like in the Dalai Lama case, the worst case scenario, if he said no, was I'm exactly where I started off anyway. This is what a lot of people struggle with asking is if you ask and they say no, you're no different than when you started off. So who cares?
Yeah.
Pursue that. Pursue the fight.
What are your thoughts on pacing and calibration your exposure to those things that are painful and you're afraid of, right?
Yeah.
Like, because that's an interesting one. So let's create a scenario where guy breaks up with girl breaks up with guy, right? So there's somebody who got broken up with, and then the person that broke up with them is off dating somebody new, right? And you know that it's going to be painful. The person who got broken up with knows that it's going to be painful to look at that person's social media of them with that other person.
Yeah.
But they know that it's out there.
Yeah.
They know it's just kind of like stalking in the shadows. But every time they do it, you know, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So eventually you gotta confront and you gotta embrace that. Right. What is your advice as far as like, do you just go right in right away and like, fuck it, I got to do this at some point anyways, might as well do it now?
Absolutely. Like, yeah,
Just
go
for
right,
it.
go right into the pain, watch the thing, and also it stems from a deep inner insecurity, like insecurity within that, like, because ultimately who cares if that person is, I get it, it's going to show up, but ultimately who cares if that person is out dating? Is it really like, you know, does it matter? That person is out dating, who cares, right?
No, but it's gonna hurt.
It's going to affect you, and I get it. And that is absolutely, God knows I get it. So confront that pain, journal on that pain, be with that pain, go into the pain as deep as you want to until really that you have nowhere to go, but then, and then be like, okay, great. That's the isness of it. But you have to go into those spaces, which most people are not going to do. Ignore the social media. Don't ignore, like, be with all of it. Confront it at its darkest level. Maybe it's something that, everybody's left me. My parents told me I'll never be with anybody. Like, go into all those spaces. Like, I'll give you an extreme example of this. I had a friend who came to me who had gone through some severe childhood trauma. And now, as a caveat, what I'm about to say, I only said to her because we had done some inner work at this point. So she was ready to go there. I wouldn't say this to everybody because it's very dark, as you're about to hear. So we were talking about this, and I asked her, what if you deserve the trauma you went through? And she literally goes, whoa. Because that was a hard thing to, like, I mean, who would say that? Like, why would you say that? What if you deserve the trauma you went through? And I asked her later on as we were having this conversation, does some part of you feel like you deserved it? She said, yes. I said, does some part of you feel guilty about it? She said, yes. I said, good. Confront those parts. What if you did deserve it? What does it mean about you? What does it mean about God? What does it mean about humanity? What does it mean about the world? What does it mean about life? What does it mean? Go there. And in fact, that very night, she sent me a text message saying, fuck you, Akshay. And she wasn't kidding. Like, she went into some dark spaces with the idea of believing that she deserved this horrible thing she went through. But when she came out of it, for the first time, she'd been married 20 plus years, she shared this experience with her husband. Never shared it before. But you have to go to those spaces. If some part of you believes you deserve it, go to that part. Maybe, and if some part of you doesn't, I'm not saying you have to go to that part, but I'm saying if some part of you does, go there. See where it takes you. And it's hard. It's freaking hard. Of course it is. You know, like, I confront that shit all the time, man. Like, all the time. Why? Like, I mean, I've wrestled with it a lot, but as I said, a few days ago, this low moment hit me. As I get a lot of emails from readers who read Fearvana, and the stuff they share, man, it is intense, because I guess when I share my intense stuff, it invites them to share, and the pain that's out there sometimes just hits, and it's like, you know, like, I mean, even running in Liberia, the first day we were running out there, this kid starts running with me. He lost his father in the Civil War. His mother left him, and he wants to go to become a doctor. The odds of him actually doing that are unfortunately very low. He lives in a village in Liberia, and it's like, why do I deserve this? I was born with a great family. I went to Westlake, great school here, you know. Why do I deserve this? What makes me different than this kid in Liberia? We were just born to different families. I don't know why I deserve it. Like, I mean, there's the things that have happened, so many things. Like, I confront this a lot too. Like, I found out 10 years after the war that my vehicle drove over an active bomb, and for some reason it didn't explode. My staff sergeant told me this 10 years after the war, now I'm sitting with all this, like, why am I here? What have I done? A lot of people drove over a bomb and it did explode. But now I'm kind of good at being at the space. So it's like, okay, I can't answer all these questions. I don't know the higher purpose. I don't know the answers. But what I do know is that I'm here now, and it's on me to not waste my life with fucking liters of vodka, and to do something meaningful with it, because there is pain in the world, and I believe I can do something about that.
And as soon as you look under the bed to see what's lurking there to stalk you, all of these fears you have, maybe it's the fear that a fear that you have that you deserve something, a fear that you have that whatever that fear is. And I think that's what's interesting about your story is, like, you actually invited her to confront that fear, not that it's true, but nonetheless, if it's a fear, it was true enough to her that she had to confront it and like explore that hypothesis to actually release that hypothesis.
Exactly.
To actually be like, no, actually, I didn't fucking deserve it.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, like until I engaged that guilt and that fear that I had that I did, I wasn't able to transcend it. But anytime it's like, it's the classic Scooby-Doo archetype, right? Like something's stalking you in this house, and then all of a sudden someone pulls the mask off and it's the fucking bellman.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, oh, it was the bellman the whole time. Like it's not that scary. It's not really a monster after all. It was this ordinary normal thing. And I think you find that over and over when you really start to allow yourself to go into those states. And I think I guess the only thing to be mindful of is be mindful that you can actually, you know, withstand what you're about to see, and make sure you have plenty of support.
That's a clear caveat. That's why even before I said, like, I wouldn't have gone there with this friend if we hadn't done the work to get there. Like, I wouldn't tell somebody just, you know, I just met this kind of stuff, because you got to be ready. It can send you to some dark spaces confronting this stuff. You have to work your way up to kind of be ready for the intensity of this. So just as a very important caveat is that, like, that you got to be kind of ready. I mean, like, but once, and you know, so you slowly start opening up the onions, like one layer at a time, right? Slowly. And then as you're ready, you can start to make your demons even work for you. You know, once you go there, it's not that the demons always go away, but you become allies with your demons, you know? Like, as an example, again, for a long time, I only recently changed this, and I'll explain why, but for a long time, I had a poster of my friend that I lost in the war up on my wall, and it says, "This should have been you. Earn this life." And my guilt became my ally. It was an intense thing to look at, obviously, as you might imagine, waking up to this, seeing it every day. Today, I've only, like literally a few months ago, I changed it to honor his death, earn this life, because the guilt was driving me too far. And the only thing that was getting me far, like, was just pure grit and will and suffering. But it was exhausting, man.
It's not going to help you play looking at that every day. So so that served you.
So now I changed it to honor his death. It served me until it served
you until it didn't.
So you got it. So once you go there, you will be able to navigate that, then figure out where on your dance, you know, like where in this dance of these different darkness and light dualities do I fit? What can work for me? And you got to slowly kind of go into those spaces, though, to find out what the quote unquote right answer is for you.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, beautiful, man. I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks,
I appreciate
brother.
you going through the journey to give, as you said, I think the most sacred gift we can give anybody is the permission that we show them they're capable of by what we're willing to do, you know. And I think you've given a lot of people permission to confront their fears and be a better version of themselves because of it. So
that's all about.
I appreciate that, man.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah,
really
you're welcome,
pleasure,
brother. And there's fucking tons of great quotes in this book. You obviously read a lot of different things,
a lot of research.
There's a ton of cool shit in here. So anybody interested, Fearvana available. Where's the best place for them to get it?
Fearvana is on Amazon, Audible, paperback, Kindle, and then fearvana.com. You can find me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Good to hang. Yep. Everybody, peace.